the 7 habits for school and for virtual schooling. And in talking to Master Lappin, I also brought up a period in my life when I was super stressed out and how I applied the 7 habits to that period. So this week she wanted me to talk about that particular time period and how I kind of applied it to that. So that's what today is about. It's about how to apply 7 habits kind of in crisis mode, and you've got way too many balls in the air and you can't really afford to drop any. So as adults, we kind of know what this is like, but even as kids, you sometimes have, oh, and I see that I'm frozen.
We can still hear you.
Okay, hopefully you can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So even as kids, sometimes you have short periods of time when you get overwhelmed, not for the entire year, but for sort of short periods of time with maybe a karate test coming up and you have a big sports event and then you have like your AP classes and everything seems to hit at the same time. So this is just kind of what you can do to kind of get through kind of a short period of time when you are almost in a crisis mode. So I kind of titled this, How to Apply the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People When You're in Crisis Mode, because that's kind of how I viewed that period in time in my life. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of what was going on in my life at that period of time. This was me in spring 2013. I had a full-time job, which was kind of high demanding. I was an operations research analyst for Transcom, which is a military command. And we did mathematical modeling to figure out how many planes and ships the military would need in the next 25 years. And they actually would take parts of my report and brief them to Congress. So it was not it was not exactly a low stress job. I mean, what I was doing was kind of important. Luckily, I had some bosses and some teammates that were very good and very understanding. In addition to that, I was teaching online for my former employer, which was Hawaii Pacific University. And because I was still associated with the military myself, I was the commander of a detachment that was part of an infantry division. So that was also kind of a part-time job for me. And I was completing my second master's degree at the same time. Now, I did not set up to have all of this happen at the same time. These things all just kind of, worked out that all of this kind of came together, and it was kind of like this perfect storm, so that in the spring, like everything was happening at once. And of course, as it happened, my husband was mobilized at the time. So technically he was still living at home, but I never saw him because he was working 14-hour days that were opposite of mine. So there would be weeks that I would only see him driving the opposite way on the highway. And I was also preparing to have some foot surgery. And, I had a kid at the time who was about 3 years old. So anyway, that's kind of what was going on in my world at that time. So I thought I kind of had this all under control. And I was finishing up my master's degree. And I was talking to my advisor about this 40-hour internship. And she assured me that my online teaching would count for the internship. And I was like, this is perfect because, I don't really have a lot of room on my plate right now to add this extra 40 hours of other stuff on, because I was taking another class at the time as well. And all I needed to do was meet with the dean to get this all signed off. and we met with the dean, and he was like, oh, I don't know who told you that, but this has to be original work. You have to do an additional 40 hours. And I'm not ashamed to say that a few tears were shed at that point, because I was just completely overwhelmed at how I was going to figure all of this out, because I felt like my plate was so heaping full at that point that I just didn't know how I could figure this all out. I didn't feel like there was a ball that I could drop, you know, without letting someone significant down. So, so let me tell you, I managed to do it all, and this is kind of how I did it. So, and in essence, what I used was the 7 highly effective habits. So I'm going to talk about kind of what I did after I kind of pulled myself together and said, okay, I'll figure this out and, you know, get through this. So obviously this is not something that I would recommend to do on a daily basis, but for short periods of time, you can manage it. So first things first, obviously you have to be proactive. You know, this is not something that you can put off. Like, you can't wait to the last minute to do a 40-hour internship. You just can't. It's not going to get done the night before. There's obviously requirements that you have to do, especially when you're trying to balance it with family, with a full-time job, and a couple other part-time jobs where people are counting on you. So you have to make a daily plan, you have to make weekly plans, and you kind of have to have those big monthly goals as well as to what you need to accomplish. You really have to take stock of what resources you have available to you, and what ones you need to get. So find out what people can help you. Now, there's not going to be someone that can do the internship for you, but maybe, you know, you're not going to have time to clean your house. You're not going to have time to walk your dog. You're not going to have time to cook all the time. So maybe you have friends that can help you out that way. You know, anything that can help you in other areas of your life. You know, when you're trying to be someone that is all things to all people, it just doesn't work. And I know as women, a lot of times we are guilty of trying to be everything to everyone. And we have to let that go. So take help when it's offered, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Start things as early as possible. Remember that you're going to need to sleep and eat and see your family. You know, this is not really a sprint. This is going to be a marathon that you're going to have to try to get through. So, you know, don't try to sprint it at the last week or the last month of this. You're going to have to pace yourself to get through this. So, habit 2, begin with the end in mind. You've got to keep track of everything that's due. You know, especially when you have this much stuff going on, you know, if you've got your work, if you've got, like, I had my regular job, I had my calculus class that I was teaching, and then I had this big military exercise that was coming up, in addition to my internship stuff that was going on. So I had to make sure that I had all of my due dates, you know, that were locked in. So, you know, however you do that, if you're a list person, if you're a paper calendar person, I had a digital calendar that I would use. I had to find one that I could use on the internet that could also use on my phone, because I worked in a secure environment, so I couldn't have my phone with me. So I had to find something that worked in both platforms. Make sure that you're working towards all your due dates, and that you have all the resources that you need for them. like I said, don't wait until the last minute to work on anything. You never know when something's going to go wrong and prevent you from completing it. Try to find places that you can work. This is very similar to when I talked about schooling. If you have distractions at home, like I had a 3-year-old who was constantly vying for my attention. So trying to write when I was at home and Keone was awake wasn't really a great environment for me. So a lot of times I would get a sitter and go to Panera and have some coffee and try to write there. You have to figure out what environments work for you. Try to keep on task and work towards your goals. Try to stay focused however you can. Sometimes I write really well when I have music in the background and headphones, and it just kind of makes me oblivious to everything else that's going on around me. And then make sure that you're setting smaller goals for yourself so that you feel like you've accomplished something, but you're still working towards your bigger goals. So habit number 3, putting first things first. Again, prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. And sometimes this is really hard to do when you have so much going on and it all seems really important. So try to figure out what's most important. When I was at my 9-to-5-ish job at Transcom, I would have to put those priorities first. And then when I get home, I try to work on, my online schooling. And sometimes when I was at my 9-to-5-ish job, I would also work on my guard job because that's when the guard people were in the office. But just try to keep track of all the important tasks. If you can set up some sort of a checklist and also some sort of intermediate checkpoints, and this will just kind of keep you on track. Also, make sure that you're checking in with your bosses and even your subordinates. Like for my guard job, I was pretty much the boss of my unit in Illinois. But I had a subordinate that pretty much ran the day-to-day operation. So I would always be checking in with him a couple times a week just to make sure that there wasn't anything that I needed to do for the unit, and make sure I wasn't missing anything. So with so many things kind of in the air, it's easy to lose sight of one. So just, touch base with your boss, say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Is there anything else that I've missed? And you can do the same if you're working, in school. Just make sure if you're working on big projects, hey, this is where I'm at. Is there anything else I need to do? Or these are the assignments I'm tracking. Is there anything else that I'm missing? And you can do that with a teacher or friends that are in your same classes, just to make sure that you're not missing something. All right, so habit number 4, think win-win. To me, this was just a lot about communication with the people around me. So there were times when I was not at my best. I was overwhelmed during this period, and I might not have had as much patience or have been as, nice and as friendly as I would like to think that I normally am. So, just make sure that the people that you're working with, they kind of understand what's going on with your situation, so that they don't think that if you say something, that they don't think that that's you being mean to them. Make sure that your boss understands, hey, I've got a lot going on right now outside of the office. It's just this short-term period, it's going to pass, but this is what's going on, and I promise as soon as this is over, you're going to have my full attention again. And my boss luckily was really understanding about this. He knew that the situation had kind of changed suddenly without my control. And so he was pretty understanding. Um, I think we talked about this before about not trying to multitask too much. It really doesn't work. So, when I was in my regular office, I really tried to be present in my regular office. And the same thing when you're with your family, choose quality over quantity. If I could spend an hour with Keone and really make that some quality time as opposed to 3 hours of just being in the same room while I'm checking emails and trying to, that hour meant a lot more. So, even though you have a lot going on, you can give up that hour and really choose the quality so that everybody is, a little bit better. That was, to me, was my win-win. Because if you're trying to spend a lot of time, but no one really gets anything out of it, everyone kind of felt badly afterwards. I think I already kind of talked about the communication. Like I said, it was really, when I get overwhelmed, I'm not necessarily a great person to be around. I tend to be a little bit short with people. I tend to get frustrated a little bit more easily than normal. So when I try to communicate, I try to make sure that the people around me that I would be most likely to maybe lash out at kind of knew what was going on, and just to be a little bit more patient with me than normal. I found that to be pretty helpful. And then just ask for help when needed. If there was something else that I knew I would have to do, like I would have to leave at a certain time because I needed to work on some stuff for my National Guard unit or my online class, make sure you ask for help. Make sure that you let your boss know or let a coworker know, because you really don't have to do everything all by yourself. There are other people that are willing to help if you let them. Habit number 5, seek first to be understood, to understand, then to be understood. To me, this was just to make sure that you understand everything that has to be done. So a lot of things in the internship, I'd have to ask for clarification on. So we didn't waste my time kind of running off in the wrong direction. And again, making sure that you sit down with your boss, make sure that you really understand what you're supposed to be doing. This was a time period for me where I didn't have a lot of time to waste. I didn't have a lot of time in general. Time to me was a very, very precious commodity. So I really had to make sure that I understood what I was supposed to be doing in every aspect of my life. So if my boss gave me a task, I needed to make sure that I understood completely what I needed to do, and not kind of wait and do something and go down the wrong path and then start over. So to me, it was really important about making sure I understood what I was supposed to be doing at every level. Definitely never be afraid to ask questions and seek clarification about what you're supposed to be doing. Check in with people as often as you feel you need to make sure that you're doing the right things. For me, again, I would check in with my boss, I would check in with my subordinates for the National Guard. For the online classes, I would check in with my students to make sure that they were getting what they needed from me. And then I would check in with my advisor from my education masters to make sure that I was on target for what I needed for that. Make sure that they understand your plan of what you're trying to do, and then adjust as necessary. If they come back and say, oh, I think this part's good, but maybe you need to, modify this, or you need to do something different here, always be willing to go back and adjust. synergize. Again, I can't mention this enough. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, no one expects you to do everything on your own. You really can't in a situation like this. Or, I mean, even just the day-to-day thing. I mean, being a mom, going to work, going to school, you know, no one has to do that all by themselves in a vacuum, you know, so always ask for help. And it's taken me a really long time to learn and accept that. I mean, I turned 46 today, and you know, not 21 like Miss Nicole said, but you know, it's probably taken me a good 40 years to really accept that asking for help is okay. So reach out to your coworkers for help. As a leader, you know, feel okay delegating, you know, recognize what people's talents are and use them. You know, it's okay to do that. You don't have to do it all by yourself as a leader. You know, your subordinates will probably really appreciate the fact that, you know, you're using their talents. You know, let your friends and family and coworkers help you out. You don't have to solve every problem by yourself. And often, you know, you can get, a lot of people will want to help, and there's a lot of people that will oftentimes offer unsolicited advice. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. You know, take it for what it's worth. But especially if you're working on stuff like for my papers and my internship, you know, I had to produce a lot of products for that. You know, I always like to ask people to read them before I submit them. So of course my husband got stuck reading them. You know, some of my coworkers got stuck reading them. You know, just so I could have some feedback before I would turn them in. And the same thing when you're in school, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, asking a friend to read them. Sometimes even your teacher will read them before they'll grade them and give you some feedback. I've done that in graduate school as well. You know, just asking a teacher to read over a draft to see if they'll comment on it before I actually turn it in. And it just helps you in the long run kind of produce a better product. So. And last, and certainly the most important part of this whole process for me was to sharpen the saw. So this was a very short-term situation for me. Not very short-term, it was a 16-week term, which felt like an eternity. But this was certainly not something that I would have been able to do for a much longer period. You know, this was a lot of things that came together kind of as a perfect storm. It was certainly not something I would have ever planned to have happen all at the same time. But it did. And, you know, I managed to somewhat successfully get through it. You know, I managed to get my foot surgery done completely. I managed to be successful in my military exercise. I managed to complete my education master's. I got a promotion at work shortly afterwards. You know, I managed to you know, not drop any of the balls. You know, but it was extremely stressful during this period. And I would not ever want to repeat this particular period of my life because it was not really pleasant at all. But if you're in a period like this, don't forget to take time for yourself. You know, you have to find a way to relax and decompress, even if it's just for, you know, half an hour a day, an hour a day, you know, a couple hours on the weekend. You have to find a way to take time for yourself and relax. You know, make time for sleep. Sleep for me was often one of those things that I just, you know, kept cutting back on. And when you cut back on sleep, your immune system gets beat up. You tend to, you know, feel fatigued and be, you know, worn out, and then you end up getting sick, all of which, you know, kind of makes you look and feel like a zombie. And, not react very well. And if you can't take care of yourself, then it's hard to, you know, be there for your family and for others. So try to eat well, try to find some time for sleep, try to find some small times to decompress, you know, whether it's to take a bath, take an hour to get a massage, you know, if you have a kid, find a babysitter and go to the movies. Just, you know, when I tried to do that though, I fell asleep during the movie. So it was, but just try to find something so that you can relax a little bit, because this is, like I said, this is kind of a marathon. It's not a sprint, but you can kind of get through it. So anyway, so this was, well, 7 years ago for me. It was probably one of the more stressful times in my life. One of the things that I was very reliant on were babysitters, and the kindness of others. And that's really the only thing that got me through this. But and the 7 habits. I mean, if I was not a very organized person, I don't think I would have been able to survive any of that. So, and I'm thankful to say now that my life is not nearly as stressful, although the decision about schools is kind of stressing me out right now, but it's not, it's not as jam-packed with activity. So anyway, so that's all I had to say. Hopefully it was a little helpful. So.
That was wonderful. Everybody clap for Miss Kathy. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that any adults that are on here can say, and most of the teenagers too have had some pretty stressful times. And so I think that was really helpful and really relatable. And for those of you guys who haven't, you probably will. And so that's even better. Hopefully you already have these skills and these tools when you get to that point, and you can handle it as well as Miss Kathy did as well. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Kathy.
Yeah, I think there was something there that we all could relate to. There was at least 1 or 2 things. Like, I almost interrupted her a couple of times and said, Rachel, that's you. You got to get enough sleep, or always ask for help. Like in your quest for black belt, we should always ask for help, because there's always someone there willing to help you. There were so many things that related to every one of us if we just think about it, you know? So thanks for sharing that, especially on your birthday. I didn't realize it was your birthday when I asked you, but happy birthday, my dear.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, so we are going to start the book Psychology of Winning tomorrow. All of you guys that are on here now have been really, really regular and consistent with Mat Chats. So if you are going to continue to stay on the Mat Chats, which I hope all of you guys will, go ahead and grab a book from the studio. We have them there, and read over chapter 1. The nice thing with this book is it's similar to the first book we did, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, where it had short chapters. It still is an advanced book. It's like written at a high level. So, you know, a lot of it, even for a lot of adults reading it, they read over it and they kind of skip over a sentence because they're like, I'm not really quite sure what he meant by that or whatever. So read through it though, because he makes so many different little points in there and so many different areas that they're kind of like what Master Lapham was just saying about what Miss Kathy said, is you'll find something that relates to you in there. So we're going to start that book tomorrow. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And if you have time, read over that first chapter tonight. It seriously is like 5 pages. That's it. So I will see everybody tomorrow morning. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful Wednesday. And Miss Kathy, I hope you have a great birthday.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Happy
Have a
birthday,
great
Miss
day.
Kathy. Bye.
Happy birthday, Miss Kathy. Have an awesome day. See you later today.
Bye.